Okay, so should I get started?
Yep.
Okay, great. So hello everyone, my name is Renee Ryan and I'm a Professor of Pharmacology at the University of Sydney, and I'll be your host for our time together today. I'd like to pay respect to the First Peoples of this nation and the custodianship of land, sea and sky, and acknowledge them as the first scientists of these lands. Today, I'm coming to you from the lands of the Bidjigal clan. This country always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So welcome to the fourth panel of the Sydney Science Trail, Women in STEM, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics. Thanks so much for joining us today. Firstly, just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. Students, if you have any questions, and I hope you do, during our discussion, please ask your teacher to put them in the Q&A section, and we will try and get to as many questions as possible at the end. This session is being recorded, but don't worry, it's just the panelists on camera. I'm really excited to welcome our panelists here today as we share our journeys into science and discuss some challenges and successes in STEM careers. With women making up just 16% of Australia's STEM skilled workforce, it is increasingly important that we share our stories and empower one another to pursue our passions, even in the face of barriers and challenges. To start off today, I would like to invite each of the panelists to speak for a few minutes and tell us about what they do in their work and also describe their journey into science. So first of all, how about we start off with Katie?
Hi everyone. So firstly, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land that I am coming from, the Dharawal Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So my name is Katie Sizeland. I work at ANSTO. I'm based in Sydney at Lucas Heights. And my journey started back in New Zealand. So I'm from New Zealand, and everything up to the end of my education for me was in New Zealand. So right back when I first came into the world and was trying to form who I wanted to be from a very young age of when I first learned to talk, my first word was why, much to my parents' amusement. So I think I've always been driven by my curiosity. I've always wondered why everything is what it is. I've always asked the questions, you know, what, why, how? And this put me on a path towards engineering. So throughout high school, I did a combination of both science and graphic design, arts, languages. So I didn't really know which way I wanted to go. And so for me, engineering was problem solving, it was creative science, it was kind of pulling all of those loves together. So I followed my passion for that into the wonderful world of engineering. I then jumped across the ditch because during my PhD, I decided I loved playing with the awesome shiny synchrotron down in Melbourne. And my work today continues to play with this beautiful instrument called the Australian synchrotron. So I use light 1,000,000 times brighter than the sun, traveling at almost the speed of light, to look at collagen materials and how we can tweak the nanostructure of collagen in these materials to make them stronger, better, longer lasting. And these are materials such as heart valve replacements, medical materials, leather, so a whole bunch of materials that we have in our world today. Oh, Renee, I think you're muted.
Oops, sorry. Naomi, would you like to tell us about your journey?
I will take it away. I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since the tree time. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and of course, future. My name is Naomi Kobelic. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a first generation Australian, meaning both of my parents were born overseas, and I was a first generation to be born here in Australia. I'm also a first generation university graduate. So I didn't really have family. I didn't have any family who'd been to university. I didn't know any scientists. I didn't intend to end up where I am today. I just thought science was cool. I liked it in school. I figured, why not do a science degree? And here I am. I'm the first scientist in my family and also the first doctor because I recently finished my PhD. So I studied stem cells. They're just these tiny little incredible cells that I just think are so cool. I spend all day in a lab growing them, looking at them, studying them, and trying to understand them better. But outside of the lab, I like talking about my science. I think it's so important that we engage with the community and make sure that science is accessible. So I've been really fortunate. I've actually been on 2 TV shows, which is crazy. I was on a show with Discovery Channel and a show with ABC. So I'm either in the lab looking at cells, or I'm doing things like this, talking about science and how much I love it.
Great, thanks so much, Naomi. And finally, Taiba, do you want to tell us about your journey?
Hi, I would first like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land where I am. That's Watamata Gals clan of the Darug Nation. And I pay respect to all the elders, past, present, and future. And my journey, I can also say that I am also from the Naomi clan. I was also the first in my family who went to university. I was the first who picked science and became a doctor. I'm originally from Pakistan and I started my journey there. I've done my master's over there. I know I love science from the beginning. When I was at school, I love solving mathematics and physics problem, and I can spend hours of that enjoying while having music on. So that was how when I was young, but I didn't know my path because you are now in a very privileged situation. I wasn't. So I don't have very much opportunities and very little to explore on. And later on, also being a woman from such a culture, it was hard later on to pick up and be independent and pick up my career. So that was hard, but I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I done whatever come across, and I passed all those hurdles. So I done my master's, then tried looking for PhD positions, and I finally got into Copenhagen, where I got a PhD position, and that turned me from a physicist, which I was in Pakistan, to astronomy, which I always wanted to be, because when I was very young, I do go to countryside and I love seeing star, counting them, and then coming back to one again because I missed from where I started. So that was always fascinating, and I always wonder how they form, what happened to them, why we see some different trails. So that always fascinated me, but there was no scope in Pakistan at that time that I could pick astronomy. But fortunately, I went to Copenhagen, I picked astronomy and became the first female astrophysicist from Pakistan also. Later on, now I went to with Homeward Bound and be also the first woman from Pakistan who went to Antarctica, and that gave me even more the media visibility as a scientist and also as a woman who is doing science. So I went to many TV shows, radios, and also went to some schools here in Sydney. And I enjoyed doing that combination of both science and communication.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you all for telling us about your journeys and how you got interested in science. So my next question for you, and we might start with you, Naomi, for this one, is what do you enjoy most about your career or your job?
I could go on for days, but I think to summarize it and wrap it up, the thing I love most about being a researcher is that I get to be curious, I get to fuel that curiosity, and I have the freedom and flexibility to delve into the unknown. So being a researcher, the purpose of what I'm doing is to answer questions that haven't been answered before. That's my cat meowing, by the way. He's very loud. But I love being able to problem solve and to try and work something out and to bring new knowledge about. So that's why I love research. When it comes to communicating science, growing up, I obviously didn't know any scientists, but I didn't see any women of color on TV. I didn't see any scientists on television who were women. And I think representation is so incredibly important. So I'm hoping through being on television, doing things like this and talking to you, I hope you realize that science is for everyone.
Great, thanks Naomi. And Tayeba, do you want to tell us what you enjoy most about your career?
So what I work on is I work on stardust. So from what we all form of. So stars actually have fuel, of course, they use, which is mostly hydrogen, and that fuel they convert into different elements, and then they form, throw out those different elements into the space. And if those elements get a chance to combine, we form these assembly of planets and like our Earth, and then even life like us. So that's what I study on. For me, what I enjoy most about is, yes, digging into this and coming closer to what helped us to get life on this planet, for example. And also that sense of accomplishment, because I think if you don't have that, you don't have life. Because if you are just doing regular stuff, which we also even do, we also care about what we will be cooking for dinner tonight, for example. But together with that, what I love about is every time when I publish something, when I dig into something, and that piece of puzzle which I solve for my research, I find that yes, that is the thing which is driving me. If I don't have that, then my life will be, I can believe it's nothing. Like, you have to have that sense of accomplishment and achievement. And that I love most about my job.
That's great. Thank you, Tayeba. And Katie, can you tell us a little bit about the thing you most enjoy about your career?
So I have to say, the thing I most enjoy about my career is the people. Every single person that I've met loves what they do so much, and that passion it's so infectious, and we get to work on the coolest problems. And just as Naomi said, we're working on problems that don't have answers yet. You know, we're using curiosity and all the skills and knowledge we have. And often to solve these problems, we need people with so many different skills. So we bring everyone from all fields of STEM together, and the people that you get to work with in every single day, in every single problem you try and solve, they're just incredible.
That's great. I might just add in there, one of the things I love most about being a scientist is traveling the world and working with people all over the world, which of course we can't do right now, but hopefully we will be able to again. And I think it is that collaboration and connection you have with people everywhere with that common goal of trying to understand, you know, humanity and the world around us. So that's great. Okay. So the next question, we're going to discuss this concept that there is gender disparity in science. We know that. We know that, as I said earlier, the Australian STEM workforce only has around 16% women. Obviously, that's different in different areas. But there are some areas like engineering, mathematics, physics, that there are really very few women. And so this is, I suppose, counterbalanced by the fact that there's also some areas and some careers that are very female dominated, like education, nursing, and some areas of healthcare. So this gender disparity in careers is an issue. And I suppose what I want to ask the panelists now is what do you think this means for us and for our future as a society? And how do you think we can address these gender disparities? So I might start with Katie for this one, if that's all right.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and there definitely are industries which, as you said, some are male dominated, but there are also the female dominated areas as well. So I guess I see it as a challenge. Everyone who's in this industry, you know, I'm in engineering. Growing up, I had no engineering role models. I had no women in engineering role models. And so I think it's a challenge for everyone who is in these industries to open that door, show that there are incredible women in all of these different fields, and that it's absolutely a place for everyone. You know, no dream is impossible just because of who you are, no matter what gender you are. So I definitely think that for everyone out there, take up the challenge. You know, let's smash those cookie cutter molds of what we think a scientist or an engineer or a mathematician might be. And really go out there. And there's so many really awesome people in these fields, and so many cool programs that are highlighting these people as well, such as Science and Technology Australia's Superstars of STEM program, or Homeward Bound that Tayeba mentioned. So there's so many people out there. Let's do it. Let's break these cookie cutter stereotypes.
That's great, Katie. Thanks. Tayeba, What would you like to say about the gender stereotypes, I suppose, that we all suffer from?
Oh, because if we see particularly, as you said, yes, nursing and other professions have are female dominated, but if we talk about science, then we only have 23% of female in science, and over time we lose them. We start off from high school with many girls who are passionate about doing science, but later on over the life we see that we are losing them. I think in our workplace we need more flexibility over time, and that will help women to grow also at an equivalent pace as men. Because women have those childbearing age period, and then other problems which you come across family. So I think we need to acknowledge that, and have some flexibility at workplace, this I would say. And other than that, what Katie also mentioned, yes, we need to tell them the female role models, because where we are now and where we see also our seniors, for example, they always have a journey, and that journey wasn't easy, of course, but they have accomplished their journey very well, and we need to present the high school students that example, that yes, it is possible. Always you need to look after your passion, and of course you will find way across that you can go to the point where you want to, and even further, even beyond that. So role models from me.
Yes, that's great. The saying, you can't be what you can't see, I think is really poignant, although it's a bit of a catchphrase. It definitely is an important thing that people need to see, whether it's people of colour on TV or women in engineering, whatever that, whatever kind of representation we're talking about. Naomi, would you like to tell us what you think about this question?
I think in my experience, it has been a real boys' club, and what we really need is more diversity collectively. It's not that girls and women aren't interested in science. We definitely are, but there are so many barriers along the way that we have to get through to actually end up being a woman in power in science. So it's just those little barriers along the way. It's really important that we recognize the intersections as well, where obviously this particular talk is really focused on the experience of women, but there are lots of other different factors as well that we need to be accountable for. But I think if we're talking about what we can do to change that, I think to the people who are from these minorities who are pushing through, I think it's to learn how to be resilient. That's really, really important, to recognize your own value and to know that you belong, even if it doesn't look like you belong when you look at the room around you. But that isn't enough. In order to create change, we need everyone to be contributing. So I think it's important that everyone recognizes their own privilege and to make sure that they're doing everything they can to support our community around them.
Great. And I might just add there that I'm actually the lead at the University of Sydney for a program called Science in Australia Gender Equity. And really that program is a nationwide program. It's about getting women into the STEM areas, but not only getting them in, retaining them. And I think that's something that some of our panelists have touched on, is that there is obviously an interest there. We have to foster that interest and encourage girls to go into these areas, but then we have to change the system to allow them to flourish. And so while yes, resilience is great and those kind of things, I also think it's about changing that system to make it better for everyone, really. And I think, you know, being more flexible and being more accommodating and valuing diversity of thought and experience is something that we all have to work at. So thank you all for pointing those things out. The next thing we're going to touch on is actually some advice. So what advice would you give to your younger self? So thinking our audience today is mainly high school students. So put yourself back in time to when you're a high school student and think about some advice you might have given yourself. And alternatively, or maybe in addition, maybe one piece of advice for success, or what do you think has really helped you to get where you are today? So younger self advice and one piece of advice for success. So Tayeba, do you want to start?
So my advice, which I have given to my younger self, actually I have implemented it, which was never give up. As I told, I am coming from a different culture. So for me, picking up a profession was never easy. My family was against it. My father was totally against it. Being independent and living alone living alone in a country and leaving my family, for example, that was never a choice, but I gone for that. So what I got over these years was never give up. Like, you will face many challenges, but you need to stick to that. I always loved doing science, and I'm so happy. I never regretted that I gone for what I wanted to, because I actually can relate to what I wanted to be. It's not like I want to be something and I never been that. I am so happy with what I am today, because internally I feel, yes, this is what I want to see where I am. Of course, there is still a long way, but I think that the advice which I have given to my younger self was never give up, because I know many of my other family members, other girls which I know who were excelling, they could even be better than me, but they give up because they only want to end up as a housewife and cooking for some other engineer, for example, or a scientist. I want to be that scientist and engineer and cooking for myself, for example. So I think that was my advice to myself, that what you want to go for it. And if you know your passion at very early age, never give up, and try all the ways which you can, so that you can reach to the point where you want to see yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tayeba. Naomi, what is some advice you would give to your younger self?
Yeah, I think growing up, I was always told it's really important to be polite, to be sweet, to be palatable. And I definitely think I embody a lot of those things. But what I wasn't taught was how to be assertive. And that's probably my biggest piece of advice that I have for you. Being assertive wasn't something that came naturally to me. I actually I see a psychologist every week, and I used to talk with my psychologist and practice how to be assertive. So we do role playing, and I would become familiar with the language I can use, which ultimately led to me having the confidence to stand my own ground and to speak up in situations, which I think is incredibly, incredibly important. I mentioned before that it's really important to have resilience and to know your own value, but I want to reiterate, you don't have to do any of this alone. Build those networks around you, find that support. That's going to be something that's going to help you excel throughout life, building that support network and knowing that there are people there to help you along the way. And I think it's really important to recognize that everyone, every single one of us listening to this, every single one of us out there, we need to step up, and we really need to step in and make sure that there is zero tolerance for any kind of discrimination whenever we see it.
Great, thanks, Naomi. And just a reminder to all you students out there, think of your questions and ask your teachers to write them in the Q&A box down the bottom of the Zoom interface. Katie, what's one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
So my piece of advice to my younger self is, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to fail. If you fail, if you make mistakes, then it's not the end. You can pick yourself back up. You can rise up stronger, more determined, put your brave pants on and get right back up. For example, when I was in high school, I was really not great at chemistry. I loved physics. I loved maths. That really, stuck with me. But chemistry, I was not really good at. If you fail at a subject, or if you fail at a problem or anything in life, it's okay. You can learn from that, so you can get right back up and keep on going and going stronger. So I definitely could have benefited from that advice much earlier.
Yeah, great. So that was some advice to our younger selves. I don't know if anyone wants to add any piece of advice for success, or what you think's helped you the most to be successful, as you all are in your careers.
Could I actually add on to what you said, Katie? Failing is such a huge part of why I'm successful. I know I didn't get the grades I expected in high school, and at the time I was like, oh my God, the world is over, everything's wrong, I'll have to do school again. But it just means I went to a different university. I moved cities. I found a city that I love. And throughout my degree, I failed subjects. That's actually how I found research. So I didn't know how to tell my mum that I failed a subject at uni, and I didn't want to extend my degree. So I was like, oh, I need to find something else. So I'm frantically Googling, and I found this summer subject, and it was a research internship. I didn't even know what it meant, but I was like, I could do it over the summer. That way I don't have to tell my mum that I failed. So I signed up, and that's how I found myself in research labs. And that's when I discovered research, and that's how I'm here. So I think knowing that failure is completely normal and embracing it and realizing that it's probably just going to take you on a different path that you didn't even know existed. It's half the fun.
Yeah, and I must point out that failing is a huge part of science, of what we do. I mean, that's the whole point, right? We ask questions, but we don't know the answer, and we have to go through the scientific process, and that a lot of that has to do with things not working and things failing. So it is definitely something that you need to be good at.
Yeah, and it makes it all the more satisfying when something does work. You're like, oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Did
anyone
was that you also felt happy? That what also not make you think of failure. So happiness is also one thing. So you feel successful when you are happy with something. So sometimes something look very bigger to someone, but you feel, oh, it is just a small piece, for example. Or sometimes you think something is so big and people are like, oh, that is just, you got high grades, for example, that's it. So it's what you feel happy for and what you be contented with, because at the end, if your inner self is happy, then you can feel that success very much, and it will come and glow on you. So it should be driven by what you want for. So even if it is science or you want to do other than science, whatever you want to do in your life, you should be happy with, and that will come across your face and you will radiate.
That's a really good point, that success is being happy, and happiness and content with what you do. Okay. All right. So I'm getting lots of questions that are flooding in. So I wonder if we should have a look at some of these, if the panelists are okay with that. So the first question is, and we've touched on this a little bit, but we can expand it, I think, is who do you have as a support network when facing challenges and barriers? Or on the other hand, celebrating success? Do you have a mentor or peer network, and how important has this been for you? So who would like to answer that? Naomi?
Do you mind if I swoop in?
Yeah, no.
I think I didn't have the best support network at my university. We're a really, really small lab, so I didn't happen to meet that many people. But I created my own network. So I sent myself to conferences. I went to an international conference on my own because that meant I was forced to meet people. And some of it was really awkward. I remember the first time I was trying to interact with these group of people. We were at the station getting tea, and I was like, chai tea is really lovely. And everyone kind of jumped, and I was like, oh God, it wasn't a very good segue. But it got better and it got better. And now that group of friends from that conference, I see them every year and they're really close to me. As I started doing more science communication and talking on things like social media, that's where I really built my huge, really tight-knit support network. So I actually have Instagram to thank for all the beautiful friends in my life. And I think that really helped me find people with similar interests, with similar values. And we're there to cheer each other on and celebrate each other's successes. And importantly, support each other through our hard moments as well.
Yeah. Great. Did anyone else want to say anything about that?
Yeah, Katie? I want to add on, yes, networking is one thing which you need. Other is also mentoring, which actually many of the school kids now need it, because when you are young, like I was the first in my family who went to university, so I didn't know what to choose. I only went with what I wanted to. So you might need many times guidance, which subjects you want to choose, what will help you the most to reach to the point where you want to be in future. So all these kind of tips and tricks, you can get it from a mentor. So if you get a very good mentor, yes, you can then grow very well. So the environment which you create through networking, and then on top, if you have a mentor, because not with everybody you can exchange everything. So the mentor is the kind of person with whom you can talk many professional or even personal things. So you need that. And that is also our job. So we get, for example, mentorship, and in return, then we also return that mentorship to people in future. And that's how our science also grows, because if we don't pass it to our peers and then the future students, then it will never work. So I think mentorship is the other one.
Great. Thanks for that, Katie.
Yeah, I'll add on. I think coming both to Tayaba's and Naomi's point, it's don't be afraid to make these networks yourself. Coming up through engineering, I didn't have a mentor, and in my career right now, I didn't have a mentor, and everyone kept talking about how great they were. And so I went out and I found 2 or 3 people who I thought were pretty epic women in engineering, and I emailed them, and now I have a mentor. So it's don't be afraid to make that connection yourself, and most definitely with the networks as well. Naomi went to a conference by herself overseas, you know, that's pretty unknown and scary, but also pretty brave. And now she has a fabulous network of, you know, fellow scientists and fellow people who love the same things that she does. So make the most of every opportunity. And if you don't have something that you think you want, make it happen.
I was exactly the same, Katie. So I did have mentors, but they were all men. And at some point I was like, look at all of the people around me, these incredible female mentors. I was like, I want one of those. So I just did the same thing. I went up to a woman at a conference that I really admired, and I was like, hey, would you mind if we have a coffee? Can we talk a bit about what we do? And I see her at that same conference every year. I've reached out to female mentors at my university. If you don't have the support network that you want, you can create it. You just have to be a little bit proactive and push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
I
So
would
it's
like
really
to
good.
add on one thing there. I have been given a piece of advice when I started my PhD, because I came from a culture and I was very shy because I went to a new culture. So I've been told I was shy, like, oh, is my question stupid? Should I ask it? Or what if I put it on and people think, oh, that was something very simple and how silly she is asking, for example. So I've been given an advice that I'll always ask a question, and the most a person can come up with saying no to you. They can't kill you, they can't do anything. They might answer you, which is good for you, or they might say they don't know, but there is no harm in asking a question. So always ask people, always try to reach out, and that's the way you grow more faster. So if you just stick into your own bubble, there will be no way you grow. So even to mentors or network where you want to reach, where you want to go for, reach out to them.
Yeah. So I think that's clearly mentoring and networking is really important, as you've seen, and I definitely agree with that. And something that Tayaba mentioned is that idea of when you are in high school and starting to think about what you want to do, your subject choices are important. And I think if there was one thing I wished I'd known back then was that things do matter a little bit. I mean, it doesn't mean that you get locked into things. And as some people said, they kind of, you know, I studied music and science and I didn't know which way I wanted to go. But a little bit of thought and planning is good to make sure that you've got the right prerequisites and you are eligible for the degrees that you might want to do. Here's another question, and Tayaba, you might want to answer this first. The question is, what's your advice if your parents and or guardians are not supporting your life decisions?
Oh, that was actually always up and down. What I have done, I can give an example. When I was I was always good during my school and high school, and my father can see it, and he wanted to me in Pakistan. It's different here, but he wanted me to sit in some civil services exam or something. He wanted me and for example, an inspector general in police, for example, after that exam, and that wasn't me. Like I could actually faint it if I see a dead body or something. It wasn't me. I'm just a scientist. I don't want to do. He pushed me. I sit on that. That's the only exam which I failed in my life. I couldn't made it for. Now to prove him, the next was my master's. So I picked up a university which actually conduct exam over the province wide. And I sit in to that exam to tell him, actually, it's not that I am bad or I failed, but it's not what I was or what you wanted me to be. So I sit in that exam for my master's in physics, and I actually, the exam was province wide and I topped that exam. So I secured top highest marks in 438 students, and that actually made him change his mind. And that was the first time he acknowledged my talent, that okay, she is a scientist. And that let him allow to me also to travel to Denmark, which wasn't possible before. So I didn't say him no. I sit in that exam, which I would say that okay, you need to argue a little bit more with your parents, but I wasn't grown up in that culture where I could argue. So I sit in that exam and fail. But yes, I then done, which I should do, that I prove him that this is what I am and I can do better. So let me do what I wanted to do. So yeah, you need to prove yourself, and the way is through studies.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Do Naomi or Katie want to say anything? Naomi?
I had a very similar experience in the sense that my parents didn't want me to be a scientist. Not because they didn't like scientists, but because, you know, my family none of us went to university. And in my family, the highest achievement was an accountant. So my mum really wanted me to be an accountant because her sister was an accountant and she was really successful. So I think it's important to recognize why she wanted me to be an accountant. It's because she wants me to feel the success and happiness that her sister felt. I went to an accounting lecture and it was the most boring thing I have ever experienced. I have friends who love it and that's great for them. But for me, I was like, no, this ain't it. I really wanted to do science and I'm very stubborn. So I did it anyway. I probably should have communicated that a bit clearer with my mum. And it took her a really long time. You know, I've been at university for 8 years. That's really long. It's not what I thought I'd do. But man, I love it so much. And now my mum is really proud of me and really happy for me because all she wanted was for me to be happy. It did take a long time for her to realize that a scientific career was what made me happy. And this is where I find my success. But as long as you persevere and recognize that all your parents want is the best for you, and when they realize you are doing what is the best for you, they'll be really happy for you as well. So just persevere.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice that, you know, a lot of the times it comes from their perception of how you will have a happy and successful life because of their own, the way they've been brought up and their own experiences rather than them thinking you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. Katie, did you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, I had a different experience. I had supportive parents along the way, but I guess now talking to a whole lot of people who are in school making those subject choices now, often you need to talk to the parents more than you do the students because it's the unknown that's scary. It's exactly that, you know, if they've been an accountant their whole life, they don't know science. They don't know what it's about or what kind of job security or what jobs you might end up in. So it's just kind of delving into the unknown and often take them along to lectures, let them, you know, jump online and find experiences that scientists have and make the unknown less scary and a little bit more known.
Great point. Okay, another question that's come up, which I like, and I think about this a lot. What can boys and men, or those that identify as male, do to counteract the kind of gender disparities we see in the STEM fields? Who would like to answer that? Naomi?
I love jumping in on anything. I'm sorry, I'm always jumping the gun. I think it's really important to stand up when you say something. If you see something, say something. It's really, really important. I think a lot of times people feel uncomfortable because they might see discrimination coming from a person of power. I'm not saying like go and fight them and start conflict, none of that, but just have a reasonable explanation and ask questions. So for example, I was at a conference and a senior male researcher told me that I should just quit. And instead of getting upset and doing something that could be confrontational, I said, you know what? I really respect your opinion. Why should I quit? And he was like, what? And I was like, tell me why I should quit. And in the end, he backpedaled. But I think asking those questions is a very easy way you can step into what could be a confrontational situation and still stand up for someone. So just having the confidence to do that and to use your voice and your privilege.
Katie or Taiba? Katie?
Yeah, I think it's becoming aware of your own bias as well. So growing up, you know, if you're in the playground and you're, you know, playing some game or making a hut, we used to make bivouacs, which are kind of on the ground huts in New Zealand. You know, picking up a log, you know, I used to come along with all of my friends and all the boys would pick up the sticks because they kind of just assumed that the girls couldn't. Girls can. So it's becoming aware of what you might be thinking at the time, coming to terms with it, even just acknowledging that it's there, and then you can do something about it and ask those questions. And as soon as you become aware of it, you start seeing it more elsewhere. And then you can start to tackle those questions head on and asking, as Naomi did, why?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Being aware of your biases, which we all have, and we're socialized, and that's not our fault. That's the way that we've been brought up, but also being aware of your privilege. And I think that's something that all of us can think about, and not just men, but everyone. Tayeba, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I can relate with what Naomi said, that, yeah, I've been also into a situation where I've been told, for example, I can't raise much money for a conference, which I wanted to, because I'm a girl and nobody might want to give girl enough money for a conference, for example. So again, I done with my father, I stand up and I wanted to prove myself. So I applied for a whole bunch of different sponsors and I got 8 at the end. And I raised actually money, which ended up not only in one conference, but actually 2 international conferences, which I raised through that, which I done through that. So that is the thing. Yes, you need to many times prove yourself. What Katie said, yes, you need to know also the bias, because if you know your inner biases also, then you can tackle these challenges very well, because you have your self-assessment, which you have done very well. Then you can stand even on a higher ground.
Yeah. And I think like we don't necessarily know what the community needs. So when you want to support people, listen to them, ask them what they need, listen to what they want, and then amplify their voices and support them in what they're asking for.
Yeah, I think that's a really good note to end on, that we can all play a role in that, but particularly boys and men as well. In listening and supporting your students that you're at school with, and also as you move into whatever career or higher training that you might choose. So it's 11:40, and that is the official end of our Women in STEM session today. So I would really like to thank our panelists, Katie Seisland, Tayeba Zafar, and Naomi Kobelik. I think it's been a really great session, and hopefully we've given you some food for thought, the students, some ideas and some inspiration that really anyone should be able to do, or can do, anything they want to do. And so follow your gut, and as Tayeba said, which I think was really nice, find what's going to make you happy, because that's really what success is about. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.